maybe the best place to start is just introducing who we are. I think many of you might have met one or a few of us, but I just noticed that there's quite a few people joining that might have not come to a Bristol Innovators group before. So I'm Lydia. Been working with Bristol Innovators Group for, I don't know, maybe a year or two now. Started from working in an old job while I was running some innovation programs in the charity sector, but now work for Set Squared Partnership as their innovation manager. So supporting companies predominantly with their funding and their investment. Got Hannah here too. Hannah, do you want to give a wave? Say hello. And Rob.
Hello.
Where's Rob? Rob, there you are. Bit of a wave to you.
Thanks, Lydia. Hello, everyone. And like Hannah, there's a few of us who co-founded the network back in 2019. And I think now we're up over 1,060 members. So it's been really interesting over the last few years. Nice to meet you all.
Yeah, nice to see you. Thanks for coming along today. And I'll hold off on introducing Michael, who's running today's session, because I think it'd be nice for you to be able to open up with a bit around your background and what you're doing, what led you to today's session. But today we are talking about the importance of developing a pitch deck. So it'd be interesting as we go along to hear what experiences in the room, I suppose, because there's many people who will be running a company right now, thinking about developing a company and thinking about the pitch deck from that angle, but actually these are also very useful tools in order to get across messages and products and services in any kind of role, really. So yeah, interested in hearing what kind of motivated you to join today. But also a focus of today's session is thinking about the storytelling element of a pitch deck. How can you convey a strong message? How might you adapt that to different audiences that you're working with? I think sometimes people can fail to invest the adequate time in thinking about the design, the storytelling, the audience on the other end, and what kind of emotions and feelings you want them to take away from the message that you're getting across. So that's what we're going to be thinking about. Just before we make a start, I'm going to pass over to Hannah just to give a bit of an introduction on Bristol Innovators Group. And then we'll pass over to Michael Green from Luna 9, who's going to be doing today's session, and he can intro and talk a bit about himself then. So over to Hannah.
Thanks, Lydia. Hi, everyone. As Lydia said, I'm Hannah, and I was part of the core group of volunteers, or I still am part of the core group of volunteers that run BIG, Bristol Innovators Group, or BIG we're often known as. As Rob said, we started the group in 2019, and since then we've grown to more than 1,000 followers on our LinkedIn group. The LinkedIn group is kind of our main way of connecting with each other. So if you haven't joined that already, I think some of you said that you were invited to this, you hadn't seen it before, so maybe that's a good place for you to join, and then you'll be the first to hear about these kind of events. So one of us will pop the link to that in the chat. So this group isn't just for people who have innovation management in their title, or innovation or innovator in their title. It's for anyone who's kind of looking to do things differently, or looking to challenge the status quo for a positive outcome. As well as kind of giving people a place to connect through the LinkedIn group, we also run events like this and in-person events as well. And we do that around kind of 3 core themes, which is connect, learn, and do. So today is all about learning. And I'm a digital marketer. That's my background. I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs through like my work with people like Futurespace and the pitch competition. So I understand like the importance of what we're going to be talking about today, what Michael's going to be talking about today and sharing with us. So I'm going to pass on to Michael now. Michael, I'll let you introduce yourself and talk about how to create a knockout pitch deck.
Thanks, guys. Lovely to see so many of you here, and hello to those of you who I know. Lovely to see you, and really nice to see some new faces as well. Delighted to be talking about this. This is something I'm very passionate about, and I know is a very important part of a lot of people's journeys as they build businesses and develop ideas. So I'm going to share some slides in a bit that hopefully shed some light on what I believe are the key fundamental building blocks of an impactful pitch deck. You'll have to forgive the speed that I'm going to go through this. I want to make sure that the hour isn't used up by me talking at you, but instead that you get the opportunity to ask some questions and challenge some points, and we can make this a bit more of a discussion. So if I'm not living the values of delivering your pitch in a very kind of calm, controlled, timely way, forgive that. But let's get stuck into it. So a bit of background first. I'm Michael. I'm one of the co-founders at Lunar9. We're a Bristol-based creative agency that focus on helping innovative companies explain complex ideas. So we do brand and design. We're dedicated to helping people to get those big ideas out there, increase engagement, increase understanding, and get people to sit up and take notice. And a huge part of that is pitching. People are always pitching, whether you're just starting out or whether you're doing your Series D. Like we work with people that are right through that spectrum, and there are certainly things. I've spoken to some very, very talented innovators, entrepreneurs who have been on this journey of raising millions and millions and millions. And the things they say about what they wish they'd known at the start are fascinating. And so trying to build some of that back in to be helpful, I think it could be beneficial for everyone. And I certainly learn a lot all the time whenever I work with innovators. So keen to learn as well. Let's start here. Complex doesn't have to mean confusing. That's our fundamental philosophy here at Lunar9. Just because something is intricate, is niche, is hard to explain, doesn't mean that you have to confuse people with it. Our job at Lunar9 is to help bridge that gap between people that are in the know and the people that need to know. So we're a brand and design agency dedicated to bringing innovative ideas to life. That's what we care about here. So what are we talking about? What makes a good pitch deck? At Lunar9, I'm the strategy director, which is just a fancy way of saying I'm the person that works with the clients that we work with right at the start of the process to figure out why people should care about what they do. How do you talk about what you do to make people feel something rather than just telling them what you do? It's a huge stumbling block for so many startups, scale-ups, big companies. Just the assumption that people will care about what you're doing and will understand it leads to brilliant ideas falling flat. So let's whiz through some of the things that we here passionately believe make a good pitch. So there are three components of a good pitch deck: storytelling, content, and experience. Storytelling is all about how you guide the audience through your information. It's the journey that you take them on. Content, we're talking about the way in which what you're saying is digested. And when I say content, I mean words, I mean design, whatever goes in the deck. And the last thing is experience, how you present yourself, how the people that you're pitching to experience that. What is a very common thing that all of us do is that it's like standing on the rooftop and just shouting at the crowd and hoping that everyone gets it. All of those people have different perspectives, different backgrounds, different interpretations. And the way that if you can put yourself in their shoes and look back at what you're doing, then you start to understand how people are going to experience the pitch itself. So these three things are the fundamental pillars of how you create a really impactful pitch deck. I'm going to go through them, and we're going to look at the various things that you should consider for each one of these things and how you can bring the three of them together into this magical sweet spot in the middle where you have a deck that is really compelling and crucially allows other people to go and pitch on your behalf. The pitch shouldn't be something that is owned only by the person pitching. It should be something you're able to get other people to buy into and get them to go and be advocates on your behalf, create that ripple effect. That's how you see real traction. And instead, what we see a lot is founders or business development people or whatever, who there is no pitch without them. As soon as they leave the room, the thing falls apart. And so fantastic if they're in the room, but you are limited. There is a ceiling there because people aren't able to get the same reaction, get the same response unless they are there delivering it. So that's one of the key things to overcome. So let's look at pillar one, storytelling. Storytelling is all about the difference between a narrative and sharing information. Sharing information is just putting facts, data, logic on a page and asking someone to digest that. Storytelling is a way of guiding people through it. And storytelling, I mean, I don't need to tell you this, storytelling is the way that we've passed down information for as long as civilization has existed. That is the way that we move people. It's the way that we teach people. And it's all linked to making people feel something. It's not enough just to tell people what you do. You have to engage them with why you're doing and how you're doing it if you want to really move them. It's a sense of purpose, intrigue, jeopardy, whatever that thing is. If you make them feel something, then you can take people with you. Otherwise, it's just information. And often the people that you're pitching to are used to being pitched to. If it's investors, they spend all day being pitched to. If you don't make them feel something within the first couple of seconds, it's just more information, it's just more slides, it's just more noise. So that is the key thing. So a little bit of very, very top level neuroscience here for you, how our brains make decisions. So the much older part of our brain, the limbic system, deals with the initial gut feeling that you have, that instinct, the sense of kind of immediate reaction that you get of kind of, oh, this is really exciting, or oh, this seems a bit weird, or like, oh, this is dangerous. That is hard to control because it's hardwired into the very, very old part of our brains. And it's the thing that makes us feel, it's aligned to your value set. It's the thing that makes you feel like something, yeah, I like this, I get this. Without data, without kind of facts, this is just that initial gut feeling. The second part is the neocortex, like another part of the brain, much newer part of the brain, deals with facts and logic and data. And it hoovers up detail. It loves all of that stuff. And what we want is to try and create an environment where we can engage the limbic system first, make someone feel something first, and then allow their neocortex to find the data and look for the facts that back up that feeling. So what often happens is people forget about the limbic system. They forget about, I mean, you don't need to know it's called the limbic system, but you forget about that, the need to make someone feel something. And pitch decks are full of facts and logic and data and reason. And this is why we are good. And the problem is, if you haven't made me feel something at the start about why I should care about this, it's just facts, it's just stuff. And whilst they might be really interesting, if you don't make me able to contextualize them into why I should care or how it fits into my world or my life or why it's a priority, all of them are just things that matter to you and they might matter to me, but we're not shared on the values of why this is an important thing to be talking about. So engage the limbic system first, set the context. Context is key here. Get them to look through the same lens as you, and you'll find it so much easier to move people. And then once they're hooked, feed the neocortex, give them the facts, give them the data, give them the things to support that initial feeling. If you don't engage the limbic system first, it's just a lot of noise. And that is one of the most common mistakes I see in pitch decks all the time, is that people skip that first stage and just think, if I just keep telling them what I'm doing and why it's so good, they're going to realize how good it is. And yeah, sometimes it works, but it's like, it's really rare. Whereas you can have an idea that's really half-baked, it's not really thought through, it's failed in loads of areas, but if you can engage someone on why it matters and what you're going after and what your kind of your sense of why is, then all of those things, all of those kind of pushbacks kind of fade away, because people are asking questions because they want to know more, not questions because they don't get it or they don't understand it or it just doesn't really make sense. So when we think about storytelling, one thing I would urge you to do is to plan it out. Now, I'm a big fan of Miro. Miro is a digital whiteboard. I'm sure loads of you have used it. It's a really good way of getting things that are in your head down onto a page. And like, I always say that Miro is like, me or Miro is like, it's what the inside of my head looks like. And you take all of these thoughts that are flying around, I want to say this and I should be saying that. You can get it down on a page and you can step back and see the narrative as a whole. So this here is a snapshot of this pitch deck, of this presentation I'm giving you now, as I planned it out. I've made chapters. I've put the information into categories where I go, right, first I'm going to talk about this, then I'll do this, then I'll do this. And it allows you to move things around and see things from that bird's eye view rather than getting into tunnel vision where you start in PowerPoint with slide 1 and you go, oh, I'm going to put this on slide 1. Next slide, put the next thing on slide 2. And you can only look at it in a linear way rather than stepping back and seeing the thing as a whole. So do plan it out, because whether you do this on the back of a napkin or in something like Miro, this is a hugely valuable step in being able to see the arc that you want to take people on. You're trying to move them from the mindset they have at the start of the pitch to the mindset you want them to have at the end of the pitch. So that journey is really important, and being able to see the whole thing is integral in telling a good story. So let's talk about components. The 4 must-have components of a story-led pitch. An intro or value proposition. You've got to give some sense of who you are and why you're there. It's lovely to think about just launch in talking about the problem, but imagine the people who are at your pitch, the people you're pitching to, like they've just been parachuted in, like no context, very little sense of who you are, what you're talking about. They might have done some research, but you've got to bring them on board. Like, who are you? Why are you here? Imagine if you joined this call and I just started talking about this stuff. It's jarring. You need some sense of why you're here. Okay, next, the problem. This is like pitch deck 101, but the problem solution arc is one of the most tried and tested ways of telling a story. This problem exists. We're solving it by doing this. This is the way our brains work. We love this problem solution thing. It's the way books and films, like the very typical arcs, are to see there is some kind of problem or strife that needs to be solved, and there is some resolution to it. Our brains are kind of pleased when we can see the movement from this is a problem to this is a solution. So that problem solution arc is really important. I'll say more about that in a second. And then the last thing, which people forget, is the ask, the next steps. So I see it all the time. People do a good pitch and they get to the end of it and they just stop talking. It's just kind of, so yeah, that's Lunar 9. And it's not enough. What you need is to give a sense of, like, what is it that I want from you? Why am I pitching to you? What is my ask? What are the next steps? What does the future look like? Whether it's, so what I want from you is an introduction to blah, blah, blah. I want a meeting, da, da, da. I want to understand more about da, 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 da. Give me a sense of where this story goes, to stop it being something that is just an interesting half an hour, but that just fizzles out at the end. So these 4 components, you don't have to have all of them, but trust me, if you start building a pitch around these, you're onto a winner. These 4 components fit in among 12 that are often seen. And I'm going to go through them really quickly. You don't have to have all of these. Some of them are relevant to investment decks, but they're not relevant to like a sales and BD deck. Other ones are. So treat the dark blue ones as ones that are really, really good to have in there, and the light blue ones as ones that can be really helpful. So let's start with a hook. A hook is a way at the start of grabbing people by the collar and saying, listen to me. It's a way of engaging the limbic system with something that people care about. So I'll give you an example. No, Gideon's on the call, so he's going to recognize this. There was a guy that I was in an accelerator with right when we started Lunar 9, and he ran a kind of outsourced IT company. His name was Chris. And it was like, you sign up for a month, you get a certain amount of hours, and you can kind of dial up, oh, I'm having a problem with my computer. When you describe it like that, it sounds fairly like, yeah, I've heard that kind of thing before. But the way he would start every pitch was by saying, did you know that, I can't remember how many hours, but this is years ago now, like 8 hours every month is wasted by employees trying to fix their own IT issues. That's a total of blah, blah, blah of your entire workforce. And when you did that, you suddenly were like, oh my goodness, I'm like, you could be losing days of time. And he suddenly framed it within the first sentence. He'd framed this as being this problem for people that people related to, that wasn't, so we offer IT services that it was going like, did you know this crazy fact? And so that led perfectly into his intro. It led perfectly into his problem. So that was a really, really good hook. You don't have to have a hook. Don't force the hook. I've seen people try to shoehorn them in, and it's just really like an awkward start when you try and say, did you know? And it's just like, it's not really that relevant. Sometimes they're great. always have the intro. We've talked about that. Always set a problem. Nirvana is a really interesting one. So Nirvana sits in between the problem solution. That's the state, like what would life be like if that problem was solved? So before we say, right, problem, companies working across innovation always struggle with communicating complex things. That's a problem. Nirvana, wouldn't it be great if everyone had a better understanding of how to connect with their audience and share information in a way that really resonated with the different audience groups they're talking to? Yes, that would be great. Okay, great. We're Lunar 9. We have this way to do that. And I launch into my solution. But before I've just gone, here's a problem and here's a way of fixing it, I've almost set that future state of taking if we're trying to get an aligned sense of values here, what does that better look like? Let's frame that so that then you can see how, when we start talking about the solution, which typically is the bulk of a pitch deck, that solution is the path to Nirvana. Sounds very grand, but it stops it from being a very kind of commercial, we exist to solve this particular problem thing, and makes it much more of a, like, this is how what we're doing can make things better. Now, some of the people that we're lucky enough to work with, Nirvana is like genuinely changing the world. Like we're gonna slash carbon emissions, or we're going to do, and other ones, Nirvana is something really simple and really basic, but it's just a better state than the status quo. And if you can set that, and you can set that context, then what you've done before you've even got to talking about yourself and what you do and why you're good, you've created the context for people to understand it. You're setting the window for people to look through. And that's what you want. You want to take control of that narrative so that you are, as much as possible, trying to control the way that people look at you and the way that they interpret you. That's what stops you from standing on the rooftop and shouting to a crowd where everyone sees you in a different way. We're trying to own that and set the context. That's how you take ownership of it. So then solution, this is the bulk of your deck. This is where you talk about what you do. But by now we've established why you're doing it, and we start talking about how you're doing it and what you're doing. So the start with why thing, you'll all be very familiar with that. It's very well trodden, very, very good. But this is that in action. This is that taking that kind of theory and putting it into practice in a deck to say, if you can engage people with the why you would do something and what good looks like, then your solution becomes a much more obvious fit for that. Rather than, if you haven't explained the problem Nirvana well enough, you're in danger of offering up a solution that they might not be aware that that is even a problem. And when you get in your bubble, I know this as well as anyone, when you're in your own bubble, you think what you're doing is awesome. And often other people will look at it and be like, yeah, didn't even realize that was a thing. Or, oh yeah, but I thought there was already that solution for it. You have to set the context. You have to make them understand why this is important so that they then look at you and go, I get why you're so good. Target market, traction, team and advisors, market visibility, competitors, all of these things are tools at your disposal. Think of these as Lego bricks that you can use to make the model that you want. You can put them in any order. You can make them, target market might be a really important part of your pitch. So it becomes a bigger part of this. These aren't slides, these are chapters. So think about these as sections that you need to talk about. You can get rid of one, you can really expand another. Team and advisors is a great one. So for certain, let's take investment decks. For investment decks, often people are investing as much in the people as they are in the idea of the company. So team and advisors becomes a much more important slide than it would if you're, say, if we did it in ours. You don't need to know everyone in the team at Lunar 9. You just need to know what we can do and see some validation of that. But you don't need to see everyone that works here. However, if we were going for 10 million in investment, you'd want to know who's behind it. Who am I investing in? And so where you put that, so let's say someone's ex-Google and they've decided to start a company, their team page, put it right at the start, because that's a massive thing. That's a really easy way to buy into them. If you're just people that have, like, you know, bootstrapped and you've got to this point, then yeah, they're buying into you, but you probably don't need to make that the first page. It's just an important part to have in the right part of the story. So these are flexible bricks to move around. Financial projections, we've talked about Ask. The last one I want to talk about here is case studies, because case studies for me is like, and I'm sorry, some of you on the call have probably heard me get on my soapbox about this before, but case studies are the most fundamental way to change how people view what you do. They're really important tools, but the default is just to use them as, hey, we did a thing. Like a case study is, so there was this challenge and then we did this and this was the solution. It's like, great, that's nice. What we want to be thinking about case studies in is a way of trying to convince the person you're talking to that what you do is incredibly valuable. So by thinking about your audience, by thinking, right, this is, okay, let's look at it this way. Let's say that you had you were going after two types of people. You're going after a company, but the key decision makers in this company, you've got a CFO and you've got a CTO. So rather than just going, here's a case study of something we did, let's think, right, let's have two case studies. I want one that is written to appeal to the CFO. This should be something that is financially driven, that shows a return on investment, that shows a clear grasp of numbers. I want this to be something that they look at and go, ah, this is like, this was written for me. The CTO is not going to be that interested in that one. Write one that's technical, that goes deep into the architecture of stuff and the process and the engineering. The CTO is going to love that stuff. So then you can decide, right, if I'm pitching just to the CTO, I'm going to take out that case study. It's not relevant. I'm going to use this one that is relevant. But case studies start to be this tool that you can manipulate to tell a story in the way that you want to tell it, rather than this generic vanilla, hey, we did a thing, which you just put into every single deck or every single proposal or whatever. Case studies are the most underused part of pitch decks, sales decks, business development decks, websites. They could work so much harder if people treated them as bespoke ways to engage with different audiences. That if you had a suite of 5 case studies, all 5 should be there for a different reason, to talk to a different group, to do a different thing, not 5 ways of saying the same thing over and over again. Right, I'll climb down now for my soapbox. So those are your bricks. There are more. You can get rid of some, but these, if you start here, if you get these in a Miro board or draw these on a piece of paper and start thinking about how you can leverage them and how your message fits into this, you start being able to form a narrative. You start being able to see how you're taking your audience on a journey. I need to go faster. Right, experience, second pillar. Experience is all about how people interact with your pitch. So before you pitch, you need to be asking yourself these key questions. Who are you pitching to? And it's not enough just to say investors or customers. Who are they? Like, where have they come from? What's their motivation? What are their challenges? Understand them. Get a sense in your head about the persona of these people. What context do they have of what you're pitching? Do they know it inside out, or is this completely new to them? What's their mindset at the start? What do you want it to be at the end? What do you want to feel or think or do? Because if you nail these things, Post-its in a Miro board, scribbles on a piece of paper, get this clear in your head before you commit anything to your deck. Then before you start putting things on PowerPoint slide 1, you should have a clear idea of what you are trying to do here. What is the journey you need to take people on to move them from mindset A to mindset B? If you don't do that, it just becomes you shouting from the rooftop. It's just you saying the thing that you want to say, rather than thinking about what does the person I'm pitching to need to hear for me to get the result that I want to get. And that's where you see, if you're pitching to an investor, you would talk dramatically differently to the way you would be pitching to a customer. So think about that. Think about with your pitch deck, and we'll get to this in a second. I'm probably going to start talking about stuff that I talk about later, but with your pitch deck, don't think about it like it is one thing. It isn't one thing. There is a deck that is a starting point for you to have really meaningful conversations. So your pitch deck might end up being 80% the same with whoever you pitch to, but the last 20% is the thing that will really engage the audience I'm talking to. That 20% is the thing that makes it really appropriate for a CFO, or really appropriate for a CTO or an investor. And by tweaking those things, tweaking case studies, tweaking language, just a bit, I'm not saying like make a load of pitch decks. I'm just saying be flexible, create an environment where you can tailor your pitch. Because I guarantee if you were stood in front of me now, pitching to me, you would be reading my cues, you would be looking at my, you'd be hearing my questions, you'd be adjusting your pitch on the fly to adjust for me, personalizing it. And the more we can do that, the better chance you have of creating a pitch that genuinely moves people. So then after your pitch, this is the key one, because often people just focus so much on the pitch itself. Just got to get this right. Just got to get this right. And then don't think about what life afterwards looks like. But what are you going to share afterwards? Would it make sense if you just share your slides? Would they make sense without you there? What happens if the person you're pitching to goes on holiday for 3 weeks and then comes back and looks at your slides and they're just a lot of cues, but there isn't much there? How would you feel about it if they just went and they went, oh, this would be really interesting for Bob down the road, and they go and put it on his desk? Like, how do you feel about them then pitching on your behalf? Is that probably loses a lot of impact. So you should take ownership of that. What can you be giving this person so that when they go and give it to Bob, they're thinking like, you're thinking like, great, yeah, share it around as much as you want. I've given you the tools here. And what's the follow-up? What are the next actions? What are you doing? What are you sharing? What are the extra resources you could be giving to people? How do you make sure that this story doesn't end with a full stop when you finished pitching to them? Whether it's a follow-up meeting, whether it's a call, whether it's further information, whatever that journey looks like, your pitch doesn't stop when you stop pitching. It has a life beyond that. And that's where I want to talk about something called the second conversation. This is a phrase that we've coined here at Luna 9, which is this idea that if you have in your mind the fact that after you've pitched to someone, they are going to go and explain this to someone else, that's a good result. What we want is like advocacy. We want other people to be cheerleaders on our behalf. So how confident do you feel that someone else can go and pitch on your behalf? Because if you feel a bit like, oh, yeah, I'm not sure they could do that, then that's a you problem. You need to be giving them the tools to do it. So let's talk about the difference between an in-person deck and a leave behind. So an in-person deck is targeted. Like I say, it's personalized. It's light on text. We don't want to be reading everything that is on screen. Like that's awful when people just write words and then just read them out. It should be cues and prompts. It should be the tool that the presenter uses to work in harmony with what they're saying. It's a visual aid. The leave behind should be something that's more versatile because it needs to be something that can cater for different audiences. It should have context. The key thing is context. And this is like one of the major things I always say to people when I say, like, what are you going to leave behind? Oh, I'll probably just share my deck. You can add a sentence, like a subtitle, to almost every slide that says, like, you wouldn't write this, but the essence of what that sentence would be is, on this slide, I am going to show you this so that you think this. Like, set the context so that I understand what I'm looking at, because I guarantee if I've been on holiday for 3 weeks, I've shared it with a colleague, whatever, it's not going to make sense. And the power of that pitch is weakened unless you give people the tools to understand it and you set the context, like I said earlier. It might be less linear. Pitch decks like this one I'm showing you now are traditionally A to B. You start at the beginning, you finish at the end. It doesn't have to be like that. You can create different ways for people to experience information. And that can be something interactive, which is great if you've got the resources or the kind of design ability to do kind of stuff like that. You can do things really simply with hyperlinks and contents pages that allow you to create something that doesn't have to be read in a very linear way. That if the crucial information is on page 8, people don't have to read page 1 to 7 if they're only going to give you 30 seconds of their time. So make it easy for people. And for that reason, the leave behind should feel familiar to your deck, but it doesn't have to be the same. It doesn't have to be that, oh, well, I showed them these decks when I did these slides when I did the presentation. So I probably have to share the exact same thing. Not at all. The leave behind should be something that is the continuation of that pitch. Okay, third pillar, we're getting there. Content. So things to consider when designing your deck. Does it form part of a joined up brand experience? This is one of the key things, okay? Because I haven't talked much about design here because design is a very, design is a thing that you can do in loads of different ways. We're all capable of doing it. It's like decorating a room. We can all decorate a room. Some people can would just slap some paint on. Some people would take it right back to the beginning and build it right back up and it would last for years and years. And neither one of those is right or wrong. It just depends on the people's budget, their inclination, their confidence, all of those kind of things. What matters is that when you pitch to people, when you show them your deck, if they went, right, I'm going to go on your website now, or I'm going to go and you meet up with them a week later, do the things feel joined up? Does it feel all part of one experience? Because what I often see is pitch decks, people adopt this idea of, well, it's a deck and I don't want to spend any money on it. And the talk's tomorrow and I haven't done it yet. So I'm just going to throw some stuff together in PowerPoint. And you look at it and you look at their website and you think, this is jarring. Like, the website looks smart, it's neat, it's got a brand, all this kind of stuff. Maybe it doesn't, but the pitch deck looks very DIY, it looks thrown together. And it needs to feel like this is a cohesive story that you're telling across the brand. Because if you do show something that feels DIY, and I'm not saying, hey, go and spend loads of money on your pitch deck. I'm just saying, consider the way people look at it. It's like inviting people into your home. A pitch deck is like guiding people around your home and showing them different rooms. If your house is a mess, people are going to think, oh, this is a mess. They might not say it, they might smile politely, but if the rooms are cluttered, if there's stuff all over the place, if you haven't tidied up, if it doesn't reflect you as a person, if you turn up to a meeting looking really scruffy, it matters. Stuff like that matters, and your pitch deck is no different. Does it reflect what it's like to partner with you? It's a continuation of that same thing. Does it give a sense of what it is like to work with you? Like I say, if your idea could be half-baked, You could be like completely bootstrapped. But if you give a sense of what going on that journey with you is like, people will buy in. So it matters if the pitch deck is a reflection of you as a person and your ethos and your philosophy and all those kind of things. It shouldn't feel detached. And lastly, is it worth getting help to maximize the design? So when I say help can range from a second pair of eyes. Hey, can you just have a look at this? Tell me honestly, what do you think? All the way up to engaging an agency like Luna 9 to go, right, I know it's in my head. I know exactly what I want to say, or maybe you don't, but help me make this the best it can possibly be. And there's a huge spectrum, and we are completely aware of the fact that different people at different stages of their journey will leverage different resources in order to make the most of it. But you have to consider the implications of that DIY attitude of going, well, I'll just do it myself. And when I've got the money, then we'll invest in design and messaging and things like that. Because the people that get noticed, the people that get that limbic system is engaged with people being like, oh, this feels good, this feels exciting, I like this. It's people that have invested the time or the resources or the energy in making sure that it is as good as it can be. And I have to stress, that doesn't mean that they've spent as much money as they can. It just means that you have put the time and the effort into trying to make sure that it feels premium, that it feels grown up, that it feels like you are investable or a good partner. So these are the 5 biggest traps to watch out for from a content and design point of view. 1, filling blank space. People love cramming stuff onto slides and filling blanks. Blank space is your friend. Think about the rooms I was talking about in your house. The more cluttered they are, the more furniture you put in, the harder it is to go in there and feel like this is a nice place to be. Same thing with the slide. Allow people who are new to this information, that don't have the same context as you, to look at it and go, okay, I make sense of this. I understand where to read and what to think about. Because if you fill a slide with loads of stuff, logos at the bottom, pictures here, loads of copy on the left, you'll be talking and people will just be looking at it, trying to make sense of it. They're not listening to you. They're just looking at the chaos. Walls of text, avoid walls of text. Bullet points are great. You've seen here that I've been going through this deck, incrementally adding bits on. Like, use this as a tool to take people on this journey and make sure that they're engaging the things that you're saying at the time, not reading ahead with loads of stuff. Information overload, like I just said it there. Introduce information incrementally. What I often see is really complicated slides, data slides, or this is our solution slides, and it's like being slapped in the face with information. You go from nothing to bam, there it all is. And you might not consciously feel it, but subconsciously people are being like, whoa, okay, right, lots to process here. Okay, am I looking at this? Am I looking at the scrambled egg? Like, what we want is people to look at something to be able to follow a narrative. You should be in control of that narrative. If you want people to read this bit first, let them read this bit first. DIY vibes, I've talked about this. You only get one chance to make a first impression. Whether it is just getting, you spend £100 for someone on Fiverr to help you with your pitch deck, or you invest loads in a full kind of, let's redo the messaging, let's do the design, let's rebrand at the same time. Just make sure that you are owning that decision and that you're not just defaulted to going, well, I've done a bit of design in my time, because get an objective, genuine, honest opinion, because I see a lot of decks where people are very proud of what they've done. And often when investors see or potential customers or partners see a lot of these decks, they will be making a judgment call on whether you look premium or not. That's just the way it is. The last thing, and I can't stress this enough, too few slides. People think, I must cut down the amount of slides. I want to get to 10 slides. So they just cram more stuff in. Why 10 slides? Why not 12 slides? Make it 12 slides and make it read better. Make it 15 slides, but make it really easy to navigate. The point isn't how long it is, it's how easy it is to digest. So I would much rather always that people really think about, plan it out, see that bird's eye view, and think about how you're guiding through this in a really easy to digest way, rather than going, well, yeah, I've simplified it down and now it's 8 slides, but those 8 slides are a real headache, because you will be creating way more problems for yourself than you solve by trying to cut stuff down. So I talked about how you can leverage specialist skills. These are some of the things you can be thinking about. Obviously, I'm biased because we do this kind of stuff, but this is the kind of thing that on whatever level can add real value. A strategist, someone to help you with an outside perspective on the problem you're trying to solve, the way you talk about it, the way you can engage people with it, so often people are in their own heads about this and they've got all the answers kind of swimming around, but actually making sense of it is something that you do need that external voice to come and help you with. A copywriter, you might have done all that early thinking, but it's amazing what a difference good copy can make. Clear messaging, emotive messaging, those are the things that are going to stay with people. And if you just DIY, if you're not a writer, you shouldn't expect to be brilliant at everything, but people take that attitude when they're doing pitch decks and just, I'll write it myself, I'll design it myself. You could choose any one of these three things. If you've only got a set amount of budget, think about where the value is most. The design might not be an issue, but get the strategy right. It might be that actually you're pretty good at designing, but words are not your thing. Get a copywriter. Like, they're not expensive. Get someone to work with you for a day when you finished your deck and go, can you tighten this up? Can you make it like convey what I want this to convey? And designers, like, there is just no getting away from the fact that the decks we've seen that are most impactful are the ones where you look at them and you go, this company looks really, really polished. And as you go on your journey and you get more, as you have more resources, the more you can engage with these kind of things to make sure that you can continue to have the impact that you want. So in summary, I'll say one parting thing, because I've given you a lot of information here. I always use the analogy of getting people to engage with what you want to say is like throwing tennis balls to them. So imagine I write messages on tennis balls and I start throwing them to you. You can catch the first 1, 2, 3, but after I start throwing more and more, you're going to start dropping them. The more tennis balls you throw at people, the more they're going to drop them and the less control you have about which of the ones they catch, if they catch any. So like, keep this in your mind whenever you're doing pitch decks. What are the 3 tennis balls or the 2 tennis balls you definitely want people to hang on to? Because everything else is great and you can put it in the leave behind, but you want to make sure you're really clear about those key messages. So here are my 3 tennis balls. 1, move past the one-size-fits-all approach. Pitch decks you shouldn't have one for everyone, because what you'll end up with is something that's a 6 out of 10 across the board. You should have a master deck that you can customize for different occasions, different people, different mindsets. Think about it like that so that you're not channeling this one-size-fits-all approach. I guarantee it will increase your cut through. 2, avoid cramming too much onto one slide. It's not about how short the deck is, it's about how easy it is to navigate. Clutter is confusing, so channel that. And the 3rd one, turn your audience into advocates. After your pitch, you want people to go away and tell other people about your pitch, to share it on your behalf. The only way they're going to do that is if you can make it clear enough that they really understand it and you give them the tools to be able to go and share it on your behalf. That's a really good leave behind. It's really clear messaging. It's not expecting them to be able to pitch. If you spent weeks coming up with this pitch and designing this pitch deck, they're not going to be able to go and do it in 30 seconds. So give them the tools to go and pitch on your behalf. That's how you see the ripple effect. There we go. Right. Sorry, that was like lightning round, but I wanted to make sure we had a bit of time at the end for questions. There's loads of stuff I could talk about more. I genuinely could talk about this all day. But I would be happy to answer any questions that you've got. And yeah, Lydia, Hannah, back to you. Hopefully that sparked some thoughts.
Thank you. That was great.
Yeah, really good. Thank you, Michael. It was actually an interesting test because as I was going through, I was writing down some notes and I thought I'm going to summarize the key messages here. 4 of those I wrote down, which was need to understand your why, use information as tools within each chapter, tailoring to your audience goes a long way, and design defines the experience and the impressions left. So I think those things are summarized in the 3 messages that you finished off with. So it's a good summary that, you know, the message you were getting across has definitely come across to me.
That's really good to know.
So we've got a bit of time for questions. There was a few that came up in the chat, so maybe we'll start with those, and then yeah, happy to, you know, open this up to the room. Feel free to unmute yourself. Maybe the first place to start is thinking about formats. So what other ways could a pitch deck potentially be presented as? I guess this is whatever you choose to explore, as long as it's fulfilling those key principles. But from your experience, Michael, you know, what other formats have been used? What's been effective?
Yeah, it's a really good question.
I was just going to quickly say that it was Angelo, I think, that asked that question. And they said that they were working on some pictures as well. So feel free to jump in, Angelo, if you have anything to add or want to ask any specific questions about that. But yeah, Michael.
Yeah, it's a really good question, because there isn't one. You won't be surprised to hear me say there isn't one way of doing it. You could create a really, really compelling pitch, Love Actually style, with just a marker and some big pieces of paper. You can go the complete other end of the scale and have these incredible, like we design some amazing interactive experiences that allow people to present in front of them, move around the information. It doubles up as a leave behind. Like, they're really, really in-depth things, but they follow the same philosophy, the same kind of structure, the same kind of storytelling. So there is a vast array of ways of doing it. The one thing I would say that is a very pragmatic point, but one worth making, is around editability. So when you move towards doing things that are less editable, so let's say I'm going to do a pitch animation instead of a deck. The customization of it, the ability to tweak it, to evolve it, which is what always happens with pitch decks. What you want is the ability to dig into it and to keep it as a live document. And the more you commit to doing things like, right, this is now going to be a finished, polished thing, like a video or something else like that, it inherently makes it harder to do that. Doesn't mean it can't work. It can work brilliantly. But if people are going on this journey of designing a deck and trying to work out the best way of telling a story, I would advocate at least starting in a format that allows you to play around with that narrative structure and allows you to add bits, take bits away, add context, swap in a case study, things like that, because those are the things that allow you to get maximum value out of the time you put into it, especially if you're working with a designer, a copywriter, or a strategist, because what you don't want is to end up, you invest lots of time in something and it's very finite and you're kind of like, yeah, that was then, but things have kind of moved on now, so you have to start again. What you want is something that you can then take on and own yourself. But there isn't really a limit to the kind of brilliant ways of sharing that kind of stuff. And we've done some very exciting things here that take the pitch deck beyond just a PowerPoint presentation. But they, like I say, the fundamental reason for doing it is always, how can we engage the audience? How can we set the context for people? And how can we make sure that either we're taking them on the journey that we want to take them on, or that we're empowering the audience to be able to explore this information in the way that they want to explore it, which is, the leave behind thing. I think last point, when you're embracing different ways to share your pitch, I would say, stick with the tried and tested method for pitching, the deck, the more linear way of doing it. But the leave behind is the way to get, that's the place to get creative. That's the way to think about, right, well, I've got this over here and I've got this here and I'd like to show this. How can you create an environment or a suite of things or a way of sharing this with people that's easy to navigate and that gives them the tools to go and share, to go and pitch on your behalf? That's what you want. That's the opportunity to do something a little bit different that really grabs attention.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Zach, you'd mentioned a few things in the chat about something called lean scenes, which I haven't come across before, so be really interested to hear about what that is, and Michael, if you've come across it as well, potentially.
Yeah, hi. I almost died 8 years ago. That's my way into it. I had meningitis. When I came back, I found that my way of working changed from being rational to rather creative, bringing in the intuition. So what I'm going to do is share a little link, which will give you some tools, which on the Creatable Michael, you'll find things like other people's viewpoints, soft systems methods, and selling. And when you click through on each of those elements, on the right-hand toolbar, you will find social, intuitive, and rational modes, which are the ways that you can take to approach building a pitch. When I build a pitch, sometimes I do it inside a client company. So I will write it up like a Shakespeare sonnet, but slightly different. So I'll put the pitch, the elevator pitch, the first 2 lines of what the idea is. Then I look at 3 types of people. Who are the masters of business that need to understand what the strategic implication is? Who are the managers who are going to manage the makers? and what are the makers going to get out of the pitch. And that can be taken up and presented to managers very quickly. If it's a no-brainer, they get it, they nod it through. If it's going to require a bit of money, then they'll come back and ask for an A4 hash business case, which can be split out into a pitch deck. And that pitch deck is usually about 10 pages. And it takes it through more from a product-oriented side of things to do. So those are the things that I got, but I really did like the presentation and your energy of putting stuff across. It was really good.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind. I liked your hook. I mean, I'm very concerned to hear that you almost died 8 years ago. That made me jump, but you had my attention, and then you explained a problem and explained a solution. So kudos on the pitch. That's
The
really,
other thing is,
really useful insight.
yeah, if you think you used a tennis metaphor at the end, most people I know who work use scrum and sprints, but if you change the metaphor to rounders, it's more like pitching and catching. And you can have 3 innings where the person pitches to the client, and then you change where the pitcher becomes the batter effectively, and they have to get round the 4 bases, which are your 4 pillars of the pitch.
Noted. You need to trademark that, Zach.
I think you picked up on something really interesting there, Zach, which is about testing how it works. So, Michael, what would be your recommendations on, I've got the pitch deck ready. I've got customers, investors lined up to talk to. Before that step, who do I need to talk to test this? How do I need to test it? And also, interestingly, AI is a big tool at the moment that people are using. So do you recommend using AI to be testing out a pitch deck?
So testing, there's 2 ends of the spectrum on testing. Testing with people that know a lot about what you're pitching, which is helpful from a sense of, am I saying this the right way? Does this all make sense? Often, though, you end up in an echo chamber where it makes sense because people already know it. There's far more value in pitching it to people that don't have the same context as you. What you want to be trying to be thinking about is, how can I be, with the things that we talked about at the start around the audience personas. So I'm looking to engage this type of person and make them feel this kind of thing. The more you can be testing out whether you're going to get that kind of cut through, the better. So, for instance, if I do a pitch deck and it's to go and let's say it's for Luna 9 to go and find some partner agencies, and I'm going to go and pitch what we do and see if we can partner up. It's far more value for me to go and test it out with some other partners that I trust, that I know will give me an objective opinion, but that don't necessarily do exactly what I do. So they'll be like, yeah, it all makes sense. Like, it's trying to find the balance between those that know a lot and those that don't know anything, and make sure that you're gleaning information from both so that you don't end up with feedback that kind of distorts what it is that you actually want to learn. But I would be doing that. It's interesting the way you described it. My pitch deck is ready. Now I'm going to go and test it. I would be doing that well before you consider your pitch deck to be ready. So when you think this is the kind of structure, this is the kind of thing that I'm going to be saying, this is what I want them to feel, test it then. Test it to get a sense of, like, am I dwelling too much on this? Because all I've done is just scribbled a few things. No, this feels about right. Great. I'm going to go and commit the time to doing the slides now. What often happens is that people will do their pitch deck, finish it, and then go and engage other people's opinions, or go, and now I'd like some design help. And actually the design help or the strategic help would have been to say, we would do this a completely different way. We put that bit there, and we really make much bigger thing of this. And you find yourself going backwards rather than going forwards. So my biggest tip there would be, the earlier you engage help within reason, the more helpful it's likely to be. And the more you can make sure that as you get this towards a point of feeling ready, that you're building on the right foundations rather than them potentially being a bit weak, and then you're getting that feedback a few days before you have to go and deliver it.
Yeah. And we've just had a question off the back of that as well, which is about the top tips of engaging the limbic system. I wonder if you'd like to unmute and ask Michael, just to give that a bit more context, that's okay.
Hi, Michael. I don't know if you can see me. I have got my video on, but I don't know if you can see me. It's Abby here from Renewable UK.
Hello, Abby. I recognise your voice.
Yeah, I don't know why it's not showing me. Sorry. That was really interesting. Really interesting kind of presentation, and it's given me a lot to think about. I just wondered whether the question I had, I completely agree with you on the limbic system thing and that kind of how you create that first overall impression and how people feel about you before you even kind of, get into the pitch. My question was just like, is that about you or is that about them? Because if you're thinking from your audience point of view, if you want them to have a particular gut reaction to you, are you trying to make kind of assumptions about what they may want to hear from you, what would be important, what their values would be at that stage, or is it more about just trying to make yourself relatable to them? In which case, I guess that's the why question. Why am I here? Why do you need to listen to me?
Yeah, I think it's both. I mean, it really depends on what you're trying to get out of your pitch. So if you let's take two classic examples. Let's say an investor deck. Typically, the reason people do investor decks is because they want some money. But there also has to be often a sense of fit of when you're bringing someone in, where often if you're giving up equity, you want to make sure that you're doing it with the right kind of person for that journey. So often that engaging them on the limbic system is you need to know that they care about the things that you care about, that they see the world the way that you see the world. And so often that initial problem solution can be used to set that, to engage them on the things that you care about, and you want to know that they care about it, or you want to move them to the headspace where they should care about this stuff too. But when you are thinking more, let's say if you were trying to win customers or win new members or whatever, it can be really helpful to think about what is the thing that's going to engage their limbic system. It doesn't necessarily have to be that I completely align with it and we're really vibing on our shared values. It's more a case of going, I need to put myself in the headspace where I can engage them on that initial gut feeling. I want them to feel something. And through research, through just good kind of audience mapping, you can get a sense like, what is that thing? And structure your story around making sure that you are kind of ticking that box, that you're pressing the right buttons. It doesn't necessarily have to be a shared thing, but often it is. But crucially, it does come down to a connection with the audience. You want to make sure the person you're pitching to feels the thing that you want them to feel at the start, so that everything else you tell them afterwards comes from that context, comes from that sense of urgency, excitement, jeopardy, whatever it is, you make them feel something. And that comes from knowing about the things that they should, you hope, care about.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Just before we stop recording, I just want to say on behalf of the Bristol Innovators Group, thank you very much for coming today. Hopefully this event made you feel something as well. And if you're not already part of the LinkedIn group, you can join that. Just search Bristol Innovators Group on LinkedIn. If you want to get in touch with any of us to find out more about the group and how you can get involved, we're bristolinnovatorsgroup@gmail.com. And also, similarly, if you want to know more about the work that Michael does at Lunar 9, you can go to Lunar9, the number 9, design, I believe it is, .com.
Right.
So thanks, Michael. I'm going to stop recording now, but if anyone here wants to hang out and chat to Michael a little bit more, feel free.